You're watching HuffPost Live. I'm Alex Miranda. The Americans, the critically acclaimed series on FX, is back with its fourth season. Let's take a look.
I'm glad you're here.
I need to talk to you.
Is everything all right?
No. In the next day or two, you're gonna get some disturbing news at work. Gene Kraft is dead.
What do you mean? What happened?
He'll be found in his apartment. It'll look like he killed himself.
God. I can't. The show is incredible. And the star of The Americans, Rhys, joins me now. And of course, also star of Brothers and Sisters, which, full disclosure, is my favorite show of all time. Of all time.
It was you.
Yes, it was me. I was the one.
You were the fan.
I was the fan.
God bless you.
Okay, so we introed this show, critically acclaimed.
Yes.
The critics adore it. And it's excellent. I've heard this being described as the best edited, the best shot, show on TV. What does it feel like now that we're back for another season to have that kind of support from the reviews?
It's sort of fantastic, and you feel. I slightly feel artificial and shallow to say it's nice to be validated by critics, but it can but help, and the sort of you strive for something, and when it's praised duly, then that's reward. But the audience is the greatest of rewards. So the combination of the two is what we truly strive for.
Yes, and we have an all new season coming up. Remind us where we were at the end of last season and what we can expect coming into season 4.
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. It was such a long time ago.
Can you even remember?
Not at all. Yeah. I was young and happy and carefree as the day was long. The end of the third season, our daughter was kind of brought into the intelligence fold. And I think that was the big tension builders. How will this be met? What will she do? And she consequently shot her mouth off. And this season has been a very sort of tense climax as to how that is resolved or dealt with and how she's dealt with.
Well, how do you think it is? I mean, obviously this is a huge disappointment to her parents, Philip and Elizabeth. What do you think the fallout, and of course you do know, but what can we expect from the fallout of her talking about what the two of you actually do for a living?
I think the writers have struck it beautifully this season, is that it's this very precarious tightrope walk whereby each week you're going, is this where the House of Cards, collapses? And that sort of line in which they walk, I think they've suspended very well and held it over a season. And at the end, well, I won't say what happens at the end. Happily, we're all still alive.
Okay. And, I was watching the beginning of this season already. I was fortunate to be able to watch it. And it starts off with a huge focus on Philip, and Philip looking back, at his life, at even his childhood, and second-guessing his job. But my question is, as a man who often kills for a living, how can he have second guesses now? I mean, why is this happening?
Well, I think you struck the chord in saying, as a man who has to take other people's lives for a living,
yeah.
he's hit a rather more extreme midlife crisis than some.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to go out and buy a sports car. I think he wants to put the gun down and stop killing people. He realizes, as many of us do, you look back over your life and you wonder whether the choices you made at a very early age, when you were very impressionable and not quite sure of yourself, have had such dramatic consequences on your life. And he's hit a time and a point in his life where he goes, I'm not sure this is what I want to be doing, or whether at all I ever want to do this. And the fact that people die as a result of this is rather horrific. But the beauty of it dramaturgically is that he's kind of trapped. He can't just say, I've had enough now, or I don't want to do this anymore. He's in this predicament whereby he has to follow a strict mandate or things fall apart and he may never see his family again.
Right. And he keeps looking back on one, you can call it an altercation, when he was very young, when he was 10 years old. Why does he keep having this nightmare back to this very specific memory that certainly formed, at least partially, who he is today?
Absolutely. I think, I think he regards it as whether or not it was a defining moment, whether, you can look at it in so many different ways, whether or not it was that very moment that took him in this one direction, or whether he's become the person because of it. He just questions his own life in a very existential way this season.
Mm-hmm. And he's seeking help this season.
Yes, yeah. Rightfully so. I think after years of bottling and containing everything, he's finally found a way of, not entirely truthfully or directly, but venting and expressing himself in a more safe environment that allows him to deal with the things he's kind of pent up his entire life.
Is he at this point, though, beyond repair? I mean, once you do this for a living, I mean, can you really work on these issues?
Absolutely. I think everyone has an opportunity of redemption, and I think he's certainly at that point and is striving for it in a certain type of way.
Yeah, the show was created and written by Joe Weisberg, who actually worked in the CIA. And as you act out these scenes, I'm wondering, do you ever look at him and go, what were you involved with? Because you can't really speak about it anyway.
No,
right?
and he's very diplomatic, borderline cagey about what he did. No, understandably. What is interesting is, more often than not, in the more extreme storylines, I will approach him and go, this is no one's going to buy this. And he'll say, well, actually, this absolutely happened. And rarely is it to do with the CIA or the FBI, but they've taken very real operations and missions the KGB did that are public knowledge by now and put them in the script. And it's that old adage that, the truth is stranger than fiction, and more often than not, the stuff that we do stops me in my tracks that the KGB would go that far in order to gain intelligence.
And it would be difficult, and I would venture to say impossible, to actually shoot a decent show on this premise if you didn't have somebody who really lived in that world. I mean, could you even put this on the air?
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly enough, we had someone who did what we did come and visit us.
What was that like?
Staggering. It was absolutely... I questioned him relentlessly for about an hour and a half. And what he had to say was truly stunning. And what was the great... we talked earlier about the being validated by critics. The greatest validation came from him when he said how accurate and how well we have it. So that was the kind of pinnacle of compliment.
I'm sure you're going to be tight-lipped about this, but what was the most shocking thing you heard from him? Come on!
The way he got out of the KGB was rather stunning. And I do have to remain tight-lipped because he has it coming out in a book very soon, which we'll all get to read about.
All right. What other storylines are you the most excited to have fans watch play out, this season?
To me, this show always works to me on a universal level. Mm-hmm. It's when people come up and say they relate to the relationships. It's all relationships. The whole show to me is about relationships, and that's when it works best. I think, its backdrop is the sort of spy world, and I think that's what makes it so universal. Is that it's so relatable. What we do is put an extreme or magnifying glass on it all. And the whole storyline with our daughter, I think, is a sort of magnified version of what it is to raise children and the sort of secrets and lies that can tear families apart.
And where does Philip, along the line of where he's been progressing with this issue of what do we do with our child? Do we even give her a choice at this point? Because I'm sure she doesn't feel like, as the character that she does have one. But what are his hopes for her as the show progresses?
I think his hope has been the same hope that we saw in episode 1 of season 1, that he wishes that both children will grow up safe and happy in the United States of America. And I think that is where it begins and ends for him. So I think any choice she makes, I think he hopes lends itself to that sole objective.
Mm-hmm. And Stan is getting very testy in the beginning of this season.
Yes.
And what do we see coming up from him and finding out more about what the two of you do?
I mean, here's the sort of beauty of placing Stan so close geographically, is that it is this very slow, intense burn of the net getting smaller for, in Stan's world, and it's certainly by now, I think, set in motion that there is this impending momentum that someday will have to come to a head, and that's where the payoff comes. The sort of beauty of very luckily having the success of 4 seasons is you can set up these very slow burns that when they pay off spectacularly.
Yeah, and just when you think that things have gotten bad, biochemical pathogens have been introduced to the show. So what can
both
we,
on set and off. Yes.
What can we expect from that coming up?
Just again, a very true moment in what the Cold War was, and had a huge overshadow on everything both sides were doing. And it was these people who we portray that were left to deal with the sort of viciousness of it all, which is, trading in this incredibly fragile and hideously dangerous world. It keeps layering the ante and upping it at every point.
Mm-hmm. And how would you compare Elizabeth and Philip at this point in time, in the storyline, in the season? How would you compare and contrast them with, how they're feeling about, being in the CIA and what they do?
I think what's been great over the 4 years is how we've kind of woven in and out, where Philip and Elizabeth have been at each other in great conflict, and now with the telling of Paige, they've been unified in many ways, in that they've both come to realize that what it is they need to do is serve her best interest. And what everything else affects is how they now begin to regard their lives and how they question their lives. And I think that's, done through the eyes of their children.
Can they ever really trust each other?
Yes.
Yes?
Is the short answer. Yes. I think they have to, but, they are each other's greatest survival asset. And I think, as much as there has been betrayal in sort of especially season 1, I think they've worked incredibly hard to reconcile that, and they realise now they almost purely only have each other.
Which is so interesting because you and Carrie are in a relationship.
Yeah.
Carrie's pregnant. How exciting! And here you two are on set in the most complicated relationship you could argue that you could depict, on television.
Yeah.
How do you not take some of that drama and just the severity of what you're depicting on camera home after work?
Very easily. You nailed it by saying this sort of the severity of that drama is very easy to leave. And what you do, there's obviously the two of us analyze quite in a very detailed way what it is the two of them are going through. And that sort of analysis, is breaking down in the discussion of relationships, but that sort of intense microcosm of Philip and Elizabeth is very happily left at the studio because there's no energy to bring that back at the end of a 14-hour day.
Okay. Actually, probably the more dramatic it is, the easier it is, because it has
yes,
hopefully no relative, connection to your actual life.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, you're going to be a father. How excited are you?
Very.
How are you feeling about that?
Very, very excited. I have to stop saying the biggest cliche of all of it being the greatest role. But, I just, very, very excited.
What kind of a dad do you anticipate that you will be? Because I think we all, before we become a father, obviously I'm not, one yet, but I think we have an image of what we'll be like as a dad. Have you thought about that?
Of course. And what's funny is you sort of, as I get older and I realize how many of my father's traits I've inherited. I think at this time, in that reflective way, where you're going, "Oh, I'm now going to become a father," you realize how much you've sort of taken on, and the ideals that you always had about what the kind of father I will be. I don't know, maybe this is just because I'm an actor, but it makes you, rather self-analytical for a while. I think until it gets to a point where you're just so tired, you're just happy if the kid's happy.
Any particular qualities that you would have wanted to borrow from your father?
Yes, he has enormous patience. He has a reserve. He has reservoirs of patience, which I hope I'll be, and a very sort of very moral and ethical way of looking at the world, and a voracious work ethic.
Yeah, and as a father, you're going to be probably playing dress up a lot. In costumes and such.
I was like at work and at home.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. So obviously, a lot of people talk about the costumes that you wear, on the show. What have been your favorite so far? Is there any that you've worn and said, "This is amazing. I can't believe I look like this"?
There was. Oh God, I can't even remember what season it was. It might be in the second season where the whole kind of disguise was very big. It was a very big beard, very long hair, and this kind of faux, like sheepskin coat. And it was sort of great to walk through the crew and have no one recognize you. Not that recognition is a problem for me, but that sort of when you interact with people who you know incredibly well and they have no idea who you are, it takes on. It does have this kind of slightly mystical energy. Yes, I can weave in between this world that I know and no one knows me. You kind of understand what that the attraction of that is, and also I do. It's been a life of dress up, and by now you kind of go, oh, you're slightly over it. But in those moments where it's something, it clicks very easily, and something is evoked quite easily. You enjoy it. You understand what it reminds you of the excitement of what it is to kind of create a character.
Did you appreciate or enjoy a costume or a look that Carrie had put on during the show more than any other?
Oh yeah, in season one, she walked on set looking like John Denver, and I called her John. I said, "You look like John Denver," and I've always appreciated it when she looks like sort of John Denver.
I've heard that you worked on a British TV series where you, and I will quote your words, cooed like a pigeon while you were being fucked.
No,
right?
I was being filleted, actually.
Filleted? Yeah. I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
That's an awkward moment.
Yeah, that was a rough moment, especially at a young, tender age. Third or fourth job. Yeah. And there's this whole kind of pigeon theme working up to it. And it's meant to be like this light moment because the two people have been making these pigeon references and he's being filleted. And this moment of climax, he kind of coos to kind of try and make her laugh. Uh-huh. But it just makes for the most uncomfortable and awkward set I've ever worked on. Actually, there was another one, but I won't bring it up.
What was the most awkward moment on this set? Perhaps from the new season.
From this season? Mm-hmm. This was very pedestrian, actually. In sort of the awkwardness comes in the emotional moments, in those relationship moments that are just painful to act out because in those ways you watch shows that make you feel uncomfortable. We have this amazing camera operator, Brad, who's always like, "Oh God, that makes me so uncomfortable," and that's what I love hearing is when you know that in those, because we go there in those relationship moments that are so uncomfortable. And if he's saying that, then it's a real box tick for me that it's working.
We talked a little bit earlier about how the critics love this show, but it's taken a little bit for the fans to, find it, I guess, and continue tuning in. Why do you think that is?
It pulls no punches. It doesn't make it an easy show for the viewer. You have to be incredibly invested, and I think from the beginning because it's all backlayered. Things that we've set up in season one pay off now. You can't just jump in on this and expect to sort of, or pick episode or a week to kind of dip in and out of. It's all 4 seasons are very interwoven, and for that reason, I think sometimes if you've missed a couple of weeks, then you may lose the show. But it calls for an investment, and in this day and age of MTV editing, it's not always the case with a modern society.
But like the way that people did tune in and invest in Brothers and Sisters, which you talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Are you surprised by how often people, ask you about it? I mean, do you continue getting asked about that show?
Brothers and Sisters?
Yeah.
No, it's for the same reason that it's for the Americans. I think the reason that show did well was it was about relationships. It was about a family, and regardless whether you have a good relationship with your family or a bad one, everyone comes from a family. Everyone can relate to those difficult moments to do with parents, to do with siblings, to do with your own children. And it's those universal themes that I think engage an audience.
Your character, Kevin Walker, on Brothers and Sisters, was one of the first, if not the first, I'm not sure, major character on a TV show. Gay character who was a fully formed character with all kinds of characteristics. It wasn't that he was gay that made him who he was.
Yeah.
And that character meant a lot for the gay community and gay characters being depicted on TV later on. After that, it was sort of a pioneering role. What was it like for you to take that on, an important depiction for the LGBT community?
It was sort of refreshing, and from the very last audition, and this incredibly beautiful, gifted writer, John Robbie Bates, was incredibly certain that this character wasn't defined by his sexuality. There was no coming out story. There was no challenge. He wasn't defined by it or identified by it. He was one of the siblings who happened to be gay, and he was so clear about that.
Yeah.
And in reading that, I just thought, oh, how refreshing, that's how it should be. And we hope that the reaction would be that, and it was. And just so refreshing for it to be on a network television show.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there was the famous wedding that took place in one of the episodes, which was the first between a gay couple in a major TV show, in America. Do you ever think about the fact that those moments, depicted on that show, could have actually made a difference in changing hearts and minds that could later on have made a difference in the rights for LGBT people? I
certainly hope so. I know in the feedback I was fortunate to have from, a number of fan letters, that was certainly the case, and the support and the hope it gave. So that was, I think more from a writing point of view, we're the conduits in a certain sort of way. We owe that to the writers, and that they handle that fantastically, and they were very conscious of that and strident in trying to achieve that. So if we're a small cog in that, if I'm a small cog in that, which I am, I'm very happy.
It was a big cog.
Good.
I watched that show with my parents, and I remember, and I was much younger back then, and that's at a very important time for a gay person. You're sort of really figuring out what you're going to do with who you are. But I remember pointing at that, or we'd be watching the show in the family room and thinking in the back of my head, like, yes, I'm so glad that they're watching this, and they can see that we're so much more than just, whatever stereotype that's so familiar that continues getting depicted over and over again. So I loved that couple. Do you still talk with Luke?
I do. I got an email from him the other day. He'd just found out that I was to become a father, and he sent a very long, beautiful email. It was lovely to hear from him.
Do you talk with the rest of the cast?
Yeah, occasionally. Ron Rifkin, I talk with. Sally Field occasionally. Callista. We all there's a lot of texting and email. Dave, Annabelle, I talk a lot with, usually weekly.
And you're also taking part in a Jungle Book project, right?
I am.
With a great cast.
Yes.
You're voicing a character.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Well,
now that you're going to be a father, this is perfect.
Of course. It's the kind of fodder that'll make the child watch. Listen, look at me. Not to be confused with the Disney project, which comes out this year,
Uh-huh.
which is that Jungle Book. This is Warner Brothers' Jungle Book, which I believe comes out next year or the year after. As with these processes, they do take an incredibly long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, phenomenal cast. And Andy Serkis, who I worked with many moons ago, who was a pioneer of this sort of technology. This has been a passion project of his for a very long time. Why he works so diligently. And at times you find out why two projects come out at the same time, because two people have been working for an incredibly long time on the same. They hear about each other's and they go, well, I'm not giving mine up. So we strode ahead and he assembled this incredible cast with this technology that he now inhabits. He knows it so well. And I hope we'll create something beautiful.
Do you anticipate taking on more child-friendly projects going on now that you'll be a dad?
Quite possibly. I hear, other friends of mine who say the same thing, that they do, they sort of do, I did that, for the kid. And because it's fun. It's incredibly, we're incredibly fortunate to be in a situation whereby we can say, watch this, I did this for you.
So what are
Power Ranger now?
Yes. Well, what would be those dream projects for you moving forward?
I don't know. That would be dependent on the kid.
Not necessarily a kid project either, just anything.
Oh, I don't know. I'd love to go back to the stage. That's what I sort of love the most. I think I'm most comfortable. But it's difficult. It's difficult to, especially fortunate enough to have been in two long-running TV shows. It's hard to kind of commit yourself to a theatre run. But that's what I'd love to do.
Matthew, it was a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
And the 4th season of The Americans premieres March 16th on FX. And for more info, check out the links in our resource well below. Stay tuned, more HuffPost Live coming up next.